Okay, so let's jump right in. We usually think of innovation as, something that happens in a sterile lab or a fancy boardroom. But what if I told you that some of the biggest changes in our markets, I'm talking the birth of whole new industries and the death of others, are actually driven by passionate groups of activists? Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on this hidden world of market rebels. To get us started, here's a little puzzle for you, one that seems to make absolutely no sense. Germany is the land of beer, right? It's famous for its beer culture. And yet, the United States, a country that was pretty much known for mass-produced watery lager, has way more independently owned breweries. How is that even possible? And here's what makes this puzzle even tougher. Basic economics says this should never have happened. See, back when this whole movement started, the top 3 beer makers in the US had a stranglehold on a staggering 98% of the market. I mean, in a market that locked down, it should be almost impossible for any new players to break in. And yet, they did. Well, the answer isn't in some business school textbook or a financial spreadsheet. Nope. The answer is a social movement. It was a group of rebels who just decided they wanted something better, and in trying to get it, they ended up changing the entire game. So, how in the world did they pull it off? Well, it turns out that these market rebels tend to use a very similar playbook, a kind of toolkit, to challenge the way things are. And it really all boils down to 2 key strategies. First up, they create what's called a hot cause. Now, think about it. If you really want to change someone's mind about something they believe deeply, you can't just throw facts and figures at them. It doesn't work. You have to connect on an emotional level. A hot cause is a simple, powerful idea that gets people fired up and makes them question everything they thought they knew. For those American beer rebels, the hot cause was just brilliant. It was simple and it was emotional. It was a full-on rejection of homogeneity, tasteless, watery beer. I mean, that's not just a critique, that's an insult. It became this rallying cry for anyone out there who believed that beer could be, and really should be, so much more. But look, a hot cause is just an idea, right? To make it real, you need the second tool in the kit: cool mobilization. This is all about getting people to actually do something different. The techniques are often super unconventional, a little bit rebellious, and they work because they empower people to act, making them feel like they're a real part of the change. A perfect example of this in action is the Microbrewing Festival. This wasn't some angry protest, it was a party. People showed up just to have a good time, but while they were there, they started discovering all these amazing new tastes. Homebrewers were swapping secrets and sharing techniques. And then the magic happens. Seeing their friends succeed made them think, hey, wait a minute, maybe I could do this too. It turned beer drinkers into beer makers. And here is the most important part of the story. The rebels didn't really steal that much of the 98% market share from the big guys. Instead, they created something entirely new. They completely expanded the definition of what beer even was, building this massive new market for craft beers that basically didn't exist before. And this isn't just a one-off story about beer. This pattern of rebels creating markets for radical new ideas, well, it's a really powerful creative force that we see over and over again. I mean, think about it. Before there was a huge market for Apple computers, there was a personal computing movement full of hobbyists and dreamers who believed a computer could be a tool for personal freedom. And before Nike became, Nike, there was a massive running movement that created millions of people who saw jogging as a lifestyle, not just a sport. In both cases, the social movement paved the way. But, and this is a really big but, this rebel toolkit is a double-edged sword. Just as it can be used to build markets and push innovation forward, it can also be used to stop it dead in its tracks. So we've seen how rebels can promote innovation, which is great. But what happens when their goal is to thwart it? Let's take a look at a couple of cases where activists went up against technologies they saw as a threat, things like cochlear implants and biotechnology. So when companies came out with cochlear implants, they thought they were just helping people hear. Simple, right? But deaf rights activists framed it in a totally different way. Their hot cause was that this technology wasn't a cure at all. It was an existential threat. They argued that by getting rid of deafness, it would also destroy sign language and the unique, vibrant culture that had been built around it. It completely reframed the debate from a medical one to a cultural one. Okay, now for an even more dramatic story. We're going to Germany, where a tiny movement, maybe 100 people, tops, took on the entire West German pharmaceutical industry to stop them from developing biotechnology. How could such a small group be so powerful? Well, they used an absolutely electric hot cause.
By directly linking biotechnology to eugenics and Germany's Nazi past, they tapped into the deepest, darkest fears of the entire culture. I mean, that argument was just emotionally explosive, and it was incredibly effective at making the public fear scientific progress.
And their cool mobilization was just as brilliant and kind of bizarre. Instead of trying to fight science with more science, they fought it with theater. They'd set up these public debates where a big company would send a PhD scientist with all their charts and data. The activists? They'd send someone dressed up as a misshapen potato. And guess who won the debate in the court of public opinion? Yeah, the potato. Every time.
And the impact was huge. You can see it right here in black and white. Around the same time the US government put out a report called Biotechnology and Its Opportunities, the German government put out its own report, Biotechnology and Its Risks. That one-word change tells you everything you need to know about how successful the movement was. The economic fallout was fast and brutal. Major German drug companies like Bayer and BASF just gave up. They were facing so much public backlash and so many regulatory roadblocks that they couldn't get their work done. So they just packed up their advanced biotech research labs and moved them to the US, to places like Berkeley and Cambridge. And the cultural impact reached right into people's private lives. Researchers talked to German scientists who could have been working on these projects and found they didn't even want to. One scientist's reason was chilling. He said his own kids had been convinced by activists that biotech was evil. He said, "Do you really think I'm going to work on a project just to have difficult dinnertime conversations? Of course not." So we've seen these rebels create and destroy entire markets. But why does understanding this pattern matter for us today? Okay, let's just boil this all down. First, market rebels are a seriously powerful two-sided force. They can build the cultural acceptance that a new idea needs to flourish, or they can create so much resistance that it just stops it cold. And they always do it using that same toolkit, an emotional hot cause and some kind of unconventional, cool mobilization. So the crucial point here is that the success or failure of a radical new idea, it often has way less to do with how good the technology is or how solid the business plan is, and way more to do with the cultural groundwork laid by these hidden forces. And that brings me to a final question I want to leave you with. Just look around at the big debates happening right now, in tech, in food, in energy, wherever. Who are the rebels? What are their hot causes? And how are they quietly shaping the world that you're going to be living in tomorrow?